heard of all of this, right? You've heard of Pompeii, lonely little city in the Roman Empire, nothing much around it. Consumed by a flood of lava from a volcano, killing everyone. Preserving them and their tiny town through the centuries. With no one left to tell the tale of what happened on that fateful day in the year 79. Except most of that simply isn't true. Pompeii wasn't exactly small. The problem wasn't really lava. And there were other cities nearby. What's more, most people escaped the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Yes, we were left with these ghostly images of Pompeii's victims, but others in different towns suffered a different fate. As for how the skeletons got here and why they were all huddled together, well, we'll get to that. But what may be the most surprising sample from our story, someone actually wrote about what happened. We have an eyewitness account. One single, solitary eyewitness account, telling a tale of one family and a frantic rescue from the ferocity of a volcano. This is a tale of two men. Two men with the same name. A tale of two Plinies. Pliny the Elder and Pliny the Younger, uncle and nephew. You know what? I'm sorry, I can't do this. These pictures are horrible. I mean, look at this one. Aside from the resolution, he definitely didn't look like that. Okay, no one really knows exactly what he looked like, but we do know one thing. Pliny the Elder was, well, he was fat. And believe me, I looked for fat Pliny pics. They all look like this. If anyone can make up anything when it comes to his appearance, then I can too. So playing the role of Pliny the Elder is famed actor John Goodman. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you keep looking at this picture. We'll use the power of artificial intelligence. And that's not going to work. Okay, that's better. Not perfect, but what do you expect? A computer made this. Anyway, we've got the same issue with Pliny the Younger. So, playing the role of the nephew, how about Canada's most popular export, young Justin Bieber? So one thing you should know about Pliny the Elder is this. He'd still be famous today, even if it wasn't for the pivotal role he's about to play in our story. He served in the Roman military in the wars in Germany, becoming a noted cavalry commander. Later, he tried to keep a low profile under the reign of Nero, Rome's sexiest emperor. Later came the rise of Emperor Vespasian, best known for starting the construction of a little building you might have heard of, as well as expanding a tax on urine, which was used to bleach togas. Yes, really. Vespasian and Pliny the Elder were old war buddies going back to their time in Germany. And apparently they were actually friends. They hung out together in Rome, had regular meetings, and I don't know, maybe they went bowling. But what Pliny's best known for is his writing. The dude wrote constantly. He wrote about grammar, wrote about the wars in Germany, and wrote the single largest surviving work from ancient Rome, his Natural History. He wrote about botany, astronomy, zoology, geology, geography, and you get the picture. The Natural History is considered to be the world's very first encyclopedia. That's what you used to buy for your bookshelves back before Microsoft Encarta CD-ROMs. What, are you getting tired of my bad jokes? Are you not entertained? The only thing Pliny the Elder loved as much as writing was taking naps. Pliny the Younger, who was quite the writer in his own right, says this. He fell asleep very easily, and would often doze and wake up again during his work. And if anyone knew about Elder's habits, it was Younger. You see, Pliny the Younger's dad died at an early age, and by the time he got to his teenage years, Pliny the Younger and his mom, Plinius, yes really, were living with her brother, Pliny the Elder. A small, happy family, until one dark day that would tear them apart. The family spotted disaster from afar. Please excuse the crudity of this model. It's the best I could do while showing Mount Vesuvius, so you'll just have to ignore the modern urban sprawl of Naples. A number of cities sat near the base of the volcano. Of course, there was Pompeii, and there was Herculaneum. Over here was Stabii, and across the bay, Misenum, home of Pliny the Elder and the Roman naval fleet. I guess his friendship with his old bowling buddy, Emperor Vespasian, paid off. Pliny the Elder was in charge of the naval fleet. It was August 24th here on the Bay of Naples, the day Pliny the Younger said it felt like the whole world was dying. Pliny the Elder spent his morning sunbathing. Then he had a bath and was studying his books. We know all of this because Pliny the Younger wrote his eyewitness account in 2 letters to the Roman historian Tacitus. It was early afternoon when Plinius looked outside. There she saw the beginning of the end. Smoke pouring from a mountain across the bay. She went to tell her brother, who immediately ran to have a look. Pliny the Younger describes the smoke like this: like an umbrella pine, for it rose to a great height on a sort of trunk, and split off into branches. Being a scientist at heart, Elder obviously wants to see what's going on. Remember, Vesuvius had been dormant for hundreds of years, and though earthquakes were common here, it's likely no one knew what that mountain truly was. Elder asks his nephew if he wants to get on a ship and go with him. Younger says no, he has a writing assignment to work on, which admittedly seems a bit odd. But he makes a point of saying his uncle gave him the assignment, and this sort of dedication and obedience to family helped make a good Roman citizen. As Elder's about to leave, everything changes. He's handed an urgent letter. It's from his friend, Rectina. Yes, really. She lives near the foot of Mount Vesuvius and her ship can't get away. The wind is blowing towards the shore. I'm guessing she must have sent a fast rider on horseback to deliver this plea for help. In the words of Younger, the expedition that started as a quest for knowledge now called for courage. Pliny the Elder marches to the docks. He won't be the only one leaving. If Rectina needs help, so do thousands of others. He orders the launching of the entire fleet. Younger and his mother watch as Elder and his fleet of ships head into the maw of the billowing cloud of Mount Vesuvius. Pompeii was the home of Mark Zuckerberg. Of course, I don't actually mean Mark Zuckerberg. If he'd lived in Pompeii, that probably would have given people a reason to flee that didn't involve a volcano. What I mean is, Pompeii was home to the super wealthy, a place for vacation villas, a welcome respite from the hustle and bustle of Rome. It was kind of like the ancient equivalent of Branson, Missouri, without the wax museum. So what we find in Pompeii are some excessively lavish Zuckerberg-level villas filled with expansive courtyards that probably hosted many a fancy barbecue.
I want my baby back ribs. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
And of course, Pompeii was also home to slaves as well as those who kept the town running. So we find frescoes, fast food restaurants, theaters, baths, bakeries, and even preserved loaves of ancient bread.
It's going to be delicious when it's done.
At the time of the eruption, Pompeii was filled with somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people, and their dogs. They had enough of those that some homes commissioned their own Beware of Dog mosaics. When Vesuvius began to blow, the residents and their dogs had a fair amount of warning. Aside from the smoke, the city was feeling the power of repeated earthquakes. Then came falling rocks, pelting the roofs. So most people got away, but not everyone. I'm guessing we all know of those today who refuse to run from a hurricane or a wildfire right up until it's too late.
You know, the disaster has been pretty brutal and tough.
And of course, there were those who were trapped in partially collapsed homes and those who weren't able to run. We've found the remains of a pregnant woman in her late teens, surrounded by family members who were presumably unwilling to leave her behind. Now, remember how I said lava wasn't really the issue in Pompeii? This is video from a camera in Indonesia, which caught what's called a pyroclastic flow, basically just a racing wall of death, full of ash and superheated gases. During excavations centuries later, voids were found in the hardened ash that buried Pompeii. Plaster was poured into these voids, preserving images of the estimated 2,000 people who died. And animals, too. Listen, it's fine if you want to have a guard dog on a leash, but you probably shouldn't run away and leave him there, right? Let's head back to our crude map, leaving Zuckerberg and his dog behind for a moment. You'll remember we spoke of the way the wind was blowing on that August afternoon. And before the pyroclastic flows, Pompeii was bearing the brunt of the volcano's wrath. In nearby Herculaneum, everything was relatively peaceful. Nothing but a bit of ash falling from the sky. Not only did this mean the town was spared buildings collapsing from the weight of ash, but it also wasn't pummeled by rocks the way Pompeii was. And it also meant the people there had even more time to get away. Now, if Pompeii was home to Zuckerberg, then Herculaneum was home to, I don't know, who's richer than the Zuck? These are pictures from the Getty Villa in California, modeled after one of the homes in Herculaneum. I think you can see what kind of place it once was. Today, Herculaneum looks like it's in a pit, and in a way it is. It was buried even deeper than Pompeii. It's also better preserved, due in part to it being less accessible to robbers. And on another note, over 3/4 of Herculaneum is still hidden beneath modern buildings. We can only guess at what's still left to be discovered. Here on the streets, we see second stories still intact, and in some places, carbonized wood. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to Pompeii. Then you'll turn a corner and run into something like this. As I mentioned, those here had more warning, and you can imagine the people must have heard about what was going on in Pompeii, giving them plenty of reason to grab their stuff and hit the road. In fact, archaeologists thought no one died here at all. They weren't finding any human remains. Then, this. These archways lead to what we call boathouses. And if you're wondering why they were here, well, this used to be the shoreline. Back before Vesuvius spilled so much debris, it pushed the beach out about a quarter mile. It was here in 1982 that archaeologists first began to realize that not everyone escaped Herculaneum. Before you get too grossed out, these aren't actual skeletons. They're fiberglass replicas. The originals have been studied extensively, giving us a ton of information on their health and even their diets. What were these people doing here? Well, that seems pretty obvious. One woman around 45 years old we call the ring lady seemed ready to go. She was wearing multiple rings and was carrying gold bracelets, perhaps her most valuable possessions. These people were waiting by the water for a rescue that never came. Or did it? As it turns out, there's evidence that a rescue did come, just a little too late. Now, I know what you're thinking. Pliny the Elder must have landed here only to get gobbled up by the pyroclastic flow, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Don't worry, we do have an idea of what happened to Elder, and we'll be getting to that. The skeletons inside the boathouses were mainly women and children. Out on what used to be the beach, the skeletons of men. The obvious question is, why did we find skeletons here when we found body-shaped voids in Pompeii? Well, the answer is a bit, let's just say, gruesome. It's believed the pyroclastic flow here got so hot that the organic components of the bodies burned away, leaving little behind but bones. In fact, it was so hot that portions of their brains turned to glass. How hot? Well, not as hot inside the boathouses as outside. Probably around 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't get me wrong, that's still unbelievably hot. But without getting too explicit, let's just say that many think death wasn't instantaneous. But as I said, it seems these people came tantalizingly close to getting away. Not only were they right up on the beach, but archaeologists found this nearby. A 30-foot boat seemingly ready to spirit them away to safety. These pictures taken by the Herculaneum Archaeological Park show the remains of a man of some distinction. A man in his 40s, facing the water, next to a large wooden beam which may be what hit him and took his life. He was carrying money and wearing a gold and silver belt, along with a sword with a hilt made of ivory. and a bag containing tools used for naval carpentry. It's believed this man was a high-ranking naval engineer found near the remnants of that boat, likely someone who answered Pliny the Elder's call for a rescue mission. And like Pliny the Elder, I think we can assume he was a man who didn't have to go. A man who went because it was his duty. A man who lost his life in an attempt to lead others to safety. A man who was just a little too late. Though my mind shrinks from remembering, I will begin. Those were the words of Pliny the Younger, recounting the events after he watched his uncle and the fleet head towards Vesuvius. He continued the studies his uncle had assigned to him, and when he went to bed, he was awoken by increasingly violent earthquakes. His mother runs in to get him, and the two head outside. Younger sits reading, and he says in his letter he's not sure if this is because he was young and brave or young and stupid. But he and his mother are reluctant to leave, not knowing what happened to Elder. A Spaniard approaches them. He's a friend of Elder's. He says Younger is a fool for not fleeing, and his mom is a fool for letting him. Soon they're swallowed up by a large crowd of panicked people as they decide to move away from the buildings, concerned they could collapse from the earthquakes. Then Younger sees something he'll never forget. The earthquakes have sucked back the sea, leaving creatures flopping around on the wet sand. The Spaniard puts the fear of the gods into them, saying, if your uncle is still alive, he will want you both to be saved. If he is dead, he will want you to survive him. Why put off your escape? Younger's mother pleads with him to leave her behind. She begs him to go. She can't move as fast as he can and doesn't want to be the cause of his death. Younger refuses. Whatever their fate, they'll face it together. But they don't get far. Ashes begin to cover the world, and Younger notices a black cloud heading towards them. Mother and son leave the road and sit, out of fear of being trampled in the dark. And hear what may be Younger's most chilling description, which I'll quote in full. You could hear the shrieks of women, the wailing of infants, and the shouting of men. Some were calling for their parents, others their children or their wives, trying to recognize them by their voices. People bewailed their own fate or that of their relatives, and there were some who prayed for death in their terror of dying. Many besought the aid of the gods, but still more imagined there were no gods left, and that the universe was plunged into eternal darkness forevermore. Then the darkness lifts. A deep layer of ash shrouds everything. Younger says it looked like snow. They return home, waiting for word of Elder. But no word comes. Eventually, Younger would have to investigate that for himself. Pliny the Elder had one single word tearing through his mind: rescue. There he stood, deep within the clutches of danger, surrounded by his fleet, facing an enemy without thought or purpose. No idea what to expect, no way to fight back. There he stood, enveloped by hot ash, racing towards Pompeii. As his ship approaches the shore, they're pelted by falling rocks, hot to the touch. The beach was beyond his grasp. Elder's ship nearly runs aground in shallow water, and the shore is blocked by volcanic debris. His helmsman urges him to turn around and head back. There's no way to land, and their very lives are in danger. But Elder won't quit. He refuses to give up and shouts out 4 words that echo through history. Fortune favors the bold. Pompeii may be unreachable, but Stabii wasn't. They head southeast, Elder telling his helmsman to steer where Pomponianus is. Senator Pomponianus was a friend of Elder's, and sure enough, Elder's able to make landfall and finds his friend at the shore, standing near a boat loaded with his belongings. Like everyone else, he's trapped by unfavorable winds. The same winds that now left Elder stranded. Pomponianus is panicked. He's terrified. Elder puts on his bravest face, trying to calm everyone by acting unconcerned. And he plays that role perfectly. Elder takes a bath back at Pomponianus' house before having dinner. Of this, Younger says, He was quite cheerful, or at any rate he pretended he was, which was no less courageous. As for Mount Vesuvius, it's nearby, and it's on fire. The group sees flames raging on the slopes. Elder puts everyone at ease by claiming they're just campfires or abandoned homes that are burning. And with that, Elder goes to bed. Others reported hearing him snoring loudly, even as the earth shook and pumice stones covered the ground. Meanwhile, Pomponianus and the other members of the household sat up all night, utterly petrified. Elder joined them and they decided what to do: stay put and hope to ride it out, or flee on foot, like so many others. They choose to run. Some use pieces of cloth to tie pillows to their heads as protection from falling rocks. Elder heads to the shore to see if there's any way to escape by sea. Though it's now daytime, they're forced to carry torches. Younger says the darkness was blacker and more dense than any other night. The sea still rages. The wind still blows towards the shore. There's no way for any boats to leave. Elder lays down on the sand and repeatedly asks for cold water to drink. Then the smell of sulfur. The group urges him to get up. Elder tries, but collapses. The others have to move on. They have no choice. Two days later, they find his body still there on the ash-covered beach. Younger says it was, quote, intact and uninjured, still fully clothed and looking more like sleep than death. What happened? Some have theorized that Elder suffered a heart attack, but Younger describes his uncle as long having suffered symptoms of what sounds like asthma. Perhaps he was done in by changing winds and volcanic fumes. He died childless and left everything he owned to his beloved nephew. No matter the case, to call this anticlimactic would be an understatement. A military veteran, one of the most well-known intellectuals and authors of the ancient world, simply fell on the sand and died, leaving nothing behind but words for us to consider, just as we contemplate the ruins of those towns destroyed by that volcano. There's no word of what happened to Rectina or Pomponianus, though we can guess that the latter survived to pass along the story of Pliny the Elder. But in the end, we're all human, and we need some way to wrap up the life of Pliny the Elder. Though he didn't fall while holding back an invading army, or collapse after carrying children from a burning building, he did launch the fleet. His actions almost certainly saved others, and he did so right on the front lines, an act that would cost him his life. And if that's not enough, maybe we can find meaning by going back to the first words of the first letter Pliny the Younger wrote to the historian Tacitus, words that put forth his uncle as one of the most fortunate of men in all the Roman Empire. After all, he's not one of those faceless skeletons, nor one of those nameless plaster casts. It is true that he perished in a catastrophe which destroyed the loveliest regions of the earth, a fate shared by whole cities and their people, and one so memorable that it is likely to make his name live forever. And he himself wrote a number of books of lasting value. The fortunate man, in my opinion, is he to whom the gods have granted the power either to do something which is worth recording or to write what is worth reading. And the most fortunate of all is the man who can do both. And if you need proof of this, well, here we are talking about Pliny the Elder nearly 2,000 years later. I'd like to think he and his nephew would both be proud.
This is really awesome. I really appreciate you guys all taking time out of your afternoon and evening to come hang out with me while I'm sitting here and grilling in my backyard.